Good morning. This is a right-leaning room, or a left, I don't know. Welcome to the new building, by the way. Some of you told me coming in that you hadn't really been here before, so welcome. It's pretty amazing. The thing that I've noticed is every time we do something here, people are happy. Just something about the building. You come in like, oh, it makes you happy, which is great. So, welcome. You made it to the fourth floor. The steps are there and takeable. You can get your exercise, but the elevator, we have two elevators. So anyway, thank you for being here. And we began a while back resuming in-person stuff after COVID on these Wednesdays. You may recall, I started our series, you guys won't know this, I started with just a softball topic, Gaza. That was like a good one. And then we did some other topics and took a little break the last couple of months. So we're back now, and my next one in August, I'm going to do another softball topic on the election and spirituality. The election can kill your spirituality, but we're going to talk about that, so that'll be fun. Anyway, I thought today it would be fun to bring our two newest clergy, and they are here. And so I have sitting with me, closest to me, Nancy Dixon Walton. Nancy, welcome. Yeah. And then next to her is Laura Heikes. We're just glad y'all are here. Y'all greet them like you're glad. There you are. So I've arranged some questions, and I've not revealed to them in advance what they are. To make it. So anyway, we'll start easy with Nancy. Where are you from?
Is this on? Oh, it is.
You're on.
I am from Apopka, Florida, which is in Central Florida, in the same county as Orlando. Mm-hmm. That's where I grew up all my years. Apopka means big potato in, I believe, a Seminole dialect. And yeah, we're the indoor foliage capital of the world. So many of your indoor plants may have started in my hometown. That's where I'm from.
Especially if you have a big potato.
Absolutely.
And you came to us from Asheville.
I came from Asheville, where I had lived since 2015.
As pastor of?
Pastor of two congregations. One was a small rural congregation for a couple years, Edneyville. I will give a shout out to the Costons, who are part of the Edneyville United Methodists, have the best apples in the area. And then for 7 years, I was at Trinity in West Asheville.
All right, Laura, I know the answers to these questions, but it's fun to ask. Where are you from?
Well, I grew up in San Antonio, Texas. That's my hometown. And then most recently, I served as, yay, I love San Antonio too. And then I was the senior pastor of McAllen First United Methodist Church, which is the furthest south you can go in Texas before you hit Mexico. We were just a few miles from Mexico at first.
And we found her because we were involved with that church in a lot of ways. And Laura and I actually did a podcast before this whole working together thing came to be, so that you could catch that. That was great fun. She did a wonderful job at that. So let's see what else I want to ask. Family. Anything you want to share about family? Nancy.
Sure. I am the proud mom of Sophia, who's about to turn 25 in 2 weeks. She is a graduate of Bowdoin College up in Maine, the polar bears. And she's been teaching high school biology with the Teach for America program for a couple years, lives in Boston, just got engaged. I'm allowed to say that now.
And she's smiling.
It's a good thing.
Yeah, good.
And I'm also the proud mama of Jeremy, Richard Jeremiah, if he's in trouble, but Jeremy, who's 21, still living in Asheville and working there and finding how to join that prefrontal cortex. He will probably be the one you meet first, and it's important to know my daughter is biological and looks a good bit like me. My son is adopted and looks nothing like me, and is a tall drink of water himself. So I look forward to you getting the chance to meet them both.
Well, thank you for that. Laura, same question, family?
Okay, my husband, Kevin, we've been married for 26 years now. I was a child bride, as you can imagine. I have 3 children. You're going to probably get to see the older 2 just on and off because they're in college. So my oldest daughter, Anna, is 20, and she's studying hydrogeology, and she's working with the USGS now as an intern and wading into streams and floodwaters and things like that. I keep telling her there's great hydrogeology in Charlotte, so if y'all know about that, help me lure her here after she graduates so she doesn't get stuck in San Antonio. My youngest is Leah, and our middle youngest of the old set is 18. She turned 18 Monday, and she's going to college. And so she's back in McAllen. She's working as a barista and saving up for a car. And then our little is Asher, and he's 7. And you'll see him a lot. And he loves to make friends, and he loves to talk. So just be ready. If you ask him a question, he will talk to you about that question.
Asher won the cutest child competition on Sunday.
Did he?
Yeah, it's an award I give periodically. Okay. He is terribly cute. What drew you to our church? You were doing something else. You weren't trying to go somewhere. You weren't job hunting. You didn't see an ad. What drew you to our church? And Laura, you were about to jump, so.
I knew y'all. I knew y'all. Before any job ever came up, and I loved you, and I've always been impressed with the heart of this church and the passion of this church. I get chills just thinking about it, the ministry that you do, and I loved being a partner. I really wasn't looking for anything. I loved my work on the border, but I know the way God has created me is that the favorite thing in my ministry is helping folks get outside the walls and meet their neighbors and connect and help those neighbors connect with God through each of us. And so when Dr. Howell called me and was like, hey, I thought, I need to explore this because this is exactly who God has created me to be. And if I could be a pastor who focuses with an amazing church on how to help you do this work that you already love, that just might be my dream come true. So that's what began it.
Laura and I were talking, and we'd been talking for a while, and then I got a phone call one day from a church consultant that I know in Atlanta. She said, I know you're looking for someone. I want to introduce you to someone that you need to know. And I said, who? She said, Laura Heikes. I know her. Anyway, that was great. Nancy, same question.
So I did a bit of a Jonah in my first engagement. So it came onto my radar in December. I had just done discernment with the staff parish at Trinity in Asheville, and I said to the person planting the seed, thank you, what a lovely opportunity that would be. I have just given Trinity my promise that I will be in ministry with them at least one more year, God willing and the bishop willing. Laid that to rest. A month later, I got another phone call with the same consider this conversation on your behalf, James, a friend of yours, and then I knew I had to pay attention. So one of the things that I have been told is one of my gifts is discernment, and I thought, I've already done discernment, so what is this coming back to me? And so I paid attention, and I had the first conversation, because I'm always open to having the first conversation, and then it was the next conversation, and then it was, will you come for a visit? And I think I said, please let me get to Ash Wednesday. And it became very clear to me after a number of weeks that God might be calling me to this place that would be the Buechner quote, the great intersection of my passion of walking alongside people in all seasons of life, celebrations, sorrows, and the norm. And my ministry has often tried to complement the needs of my family. So I have said no to other things in order to meet my family's needs. So I cared for my mother-in-law for 5 years. I always was kind of the person on call for the kids when they were in school, and those were no longer needs. And I realized I could really say yes to something that I felt called to without there being a competitive aspect to the rest of my life. And it was a joyful thing to be able to say, even while hard to leave Asheville in the summer. Thank you, James.
It was not hard to leave McAllen in the summer.
We're in between, yeah, fair enough. Let's kind of talk God and theology some. Here's a question I love to ask people. What for you is kind of a favorite moment in the Bible of yours, and why?
I love the end of the saga of Joseph and his brothers. I love that scene where he's weeping because he recognizes the grace of all of what's coming together, and the theology that he uses in that moment where he says, all of this may have had evil, this is the Nancy translation, evil attached to it. There may have been intentions that were not good, and yet God still works in it, and reconciliation has happened in this place. And that is my really one of my touchstones of how I approach the world.
We've talked about this passage before, Genesis 45. You have to read the whole story from Genesis 37, but Joseph's got the mess with his brothers, and then it's just a miraculous reconciliation. And I would call it the theological high water mark of the Bible. I said that to a group of preachers one time, and they all wanted to argue with me about, what about the resurrection? It is a resurrection. It's the same God. It's the same kind of way that God is in the world.
It's a lovely peek into family systems, too, which I've dipped my toe in the last 10 years, and I love it because it reminds us that life and families are really messy, and yet God still works through that system, and even outside of a family system in terms of culture.
Yeah, one of our, since we started meeting in person, I did a thing on marriage in the Bible. Some of you may remember this. And people came expecting me to here are 7 key pieces of advice in the Bible to have a happy marriage. And what I did instead is I just said, here are the marriages in the Bible. And it's not a go thou and do likewise. They're a train wreck. And the families in the Bible, I mean, you just don't have this kind of sweet, happy family. They're a mess. They're a disaster, which I love because that means there's room for all of us. God uses those people. Anyway, rambling now. So, Laura, Bible.
Gosh, it's like asking your favorite child. Are we allowed to do that? But I think I would say one of my favorites is where Jesus is leaving the disciples. Last words are important, right? Like if someone speaks last words to you, you treasure those. And his last words to them are, you have received the Holy Spirit, right? Now go to Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and the ends of the earth. And I love that because all of that, even Jerusalem for them, that wasn't like home base. They were from Galilee, most of them. So they had to go to this town where all the power was and share the good news there. And then Judea, that's their country, but they're speaking different accents, right? Have y'all noticed some people have different accents? Samaria. Ew, those are the people we don't like. Like, we'd walk around if we could. And the ends of the earth, I am always touched that Jesus doesn't say, let me just stay here and get this church started right. He trusts imperfect people like you and me to continue his work. And so that's always inspired me.
I've told a few of this before. A while back, somebody was introducing me when I was giving a talk. He didn't really know me very well, and he said, and he's the father of 3 wonderful children. And I got to the mic, and I said, this week 2, as it turns out. So, I've been interested lately in, I need to write something on it or think it through better, but kind of surprise in the Bible or surprise in the life of faith. We don't always think about surprises, but yet if you read the Bible, people are always being surprised by something or another that God has done, something they did not expect. I always like to think that even grace and mercy, there's a surprise element to that, right? It's not something that you worked for, that you earned, that you expected to have coming. It's just God did that for me. It's just a beautiful thing when we have surprise. I love the moment in Genesis chapter 28. Just read the story and tell you something funny and then ask them a couple questions. I promise not to talk too much today. Jacob is on the run from his brother, another dysfunctional family. Taking one of the stones of the place, he put it under his head and lay down in that place to sleep. He dreamed that there was a ladder set up on the earth. The top of it reached into heaven, and behold, angels of God were ascending and descending on it. A few of you have heard this before. It just bears repeating. I have a good friend that I was at his church one Sunday morning, and he was doing the children's sermon. And he's a big, tall, angular guy and way too dramatic, enormous ego. So he's got the kids down there, and he's narrating this story, and he said, and there were angels going up and down and up and down and up. And this kid turns to the congregation and says, he doesn't know up from down. It was just it was a wonderful moment. So this goes on, and then Jacob wakes up, and I love this. Jacob awoke from his sleep and said, surely the Lord is in this place, but I did not know it. So I love to think about that. When is the Lord in a place and you do not know it? The answer actually is all the time, right? Sometimes you know it, but God's actually always in the place, but you don't always realize it. So I've tried to think over these things about when is God present. Like we think that God's in the sanctuary at church. God probably comes over to this building too, right? God's clearly in church. Maybe you have a place where you bow your head and you pray and you think God is in that place. But how do we discover God in other places? How are we surprised by God in other places? And I think sometimes we only know that in retrospect. Like in the moment, you're just doing whatever you're doing. But then later you look back and you think, that God was in that. God orchestrated something. God was kind. So I'm interested in surprising times that you maybe have sensed God's presence. Laura's got a little bit of cred here because she wrote a book on this topic. Doesn't mean she knows more. She just wrote a book. I've written a bunch of books. I don't know much at all. It's called Finding God. This is what our podcast was about. And in it, just tell them, like, what's this book about? You decided to, how do I see God in unexpected places like the trash dump?
Well, it started my very first year in ministry. I was on staff at a large church, and I was a preaching pastor my whole time, even as an associate. And I was working with the lead pastor, and he said, wouldn't it be interesting to look for God outside the church? And I was like, yes, it would. You know, that's even 1 year in, that was my thing. And so he thought of some places, and his places were like the hospital, you know, the highway. They were places that are very important. And I was like, hey, church, where would be the hardest place you think we could never find God, right? And they were like, oh, game on. So they gave me this list of really hard places. And then I was like, let's go look. And so that's how it started. And they had so much insight through going to those hard places that they thought she'll never find God there. That's why they told me those places, because they thought it was impossible. And then we'd go and we'd discover God had beaten us there. And it was so good, and it helped me get to know a town, and it helped the people get to know their town so well that I just kept doing it.
What's an example?
Like from the book, or?
Just anything.
Well, I think the hardest one for me initially was this really... This nightclub it was really hard for me. I had to go stay up past my bedtime. I've always been kind of an old fuddy-duddy, even in my 20s. And so I was at this nightclub that these young cadets in the Air Force, San Angelo was a town that had a base, and it was military intelligence, and they were training, and they said, we're going to go to Graham Central Station, and we'll meet you there. I'm punctual, so I was there early, and they were not. So I was just loitering outside of this nightclub. Like, I do not belong here. Send me home. And then to go in, and there were people dancing in cages and people dancing on top of the bar. And I mean, there was one room that was like country western dancing. I was like, let's stay here. But the goal wasn't to be comfortable. It was to find God in the soup. So that was one of the places. The trash dump is another that I thought it actually ended up. I saw God all over the trash dump. It was amazing.
Go back to God at the nightclub. How'd you see God there?
Well, that was one of the people there were not particularly nice to me. Like I sat in a chair and somebody yelled at me to get out the chair. It was their chair. I ended up standing.
It's kind of like church, isn't it?
It was. There were a lot of things I could have preached on from that.
We've sat on this pew for generations.
But as I sat there in the darkness with the fog machine and the cages and the lights, I was alone at that point. I don't remember why they had abandoned me, but they did. And I was like, where are you? Where are you right now so I can find you and get out? And I felt like God said, I'm here because you came. There's a pastor in this nightclub. And so I can be here because you're here. You know, it's not like God wasn't already there, but God had, through this, brought a pastor to that nightclub. And it was the same thing one time I went into a tattoo parlor, which was also very edgy for me at the time. I don't think it was, I don't have a tattoo, but I don't think it would scare me like it did when I was younger. But this guy had like a loaded gun on his lap as we were talking. And I was like, oh my gosh, you know, let me get home to my kids. But the questions that he was asking, once he got over that I was a pastor and I was looking for God in a tattoo parlor, he was just asking about how to be a good dad and what God thought of him and about forgiveness. And the fact that I went there, I don't know that he'd ever have gone to my church, but I hope it opened a door for a relationship. And I was touched by how many questions he had about God, sincere. And yet if he would have walked into my church, I'm not sure he would have been welcome just because of the way he looked. So those were some of the things. That's more of like a self-discovery. Sometimes it would actually be like, oh my gosh, that is a witness to God right smack in the middle of this place. So
Jesus, you may recall, was he scandalized the religious people because of where he went and the people that he hung out with, and he just saw people. He wasn't trying to whip them into shape, or he just saw them and he loved them for where they were. Jesus only, as best I can tell, only judgmental words and thoughts were directed toward the pious people who thought they were in a position to judge everybody else. Humbling thought. Nancy.
So I have lots. One of the more recent ones was in the courtroom. I had to go with somebody that I cared about quite a bit because they asked for my presence to go with them. And a couple things happened. So the first thing that happened that made me discern, to use that word again, that I better pay attention, is that I'm standing with this person that had asked me to come alongside them. And I look up, and there is another person about my age with a younger person that they had accompanied to court. And we're like, hey! And the two younger people were like, oh, they're going to have a moment. They're going to talk and chat it up. And then the other party asked if I would pray. I wasn't the only one who could pray, but apparently that's what I represented. I said, absolutely. So we prayed before we even went into the courtroom. Then we went into the courtroom and we got situated. And I am seeing all walks of life. And it's like case after case after case. people who are presenting, I don't know their story other than what I'm hearing and what's being presented, but they present as upstanding citizens who are there for DUIs. They're presenting for things that I would not necessarily have expected in my limited experience and not having been in a courtroom much. So I'm thinking, wow, you know, what we don't know behind the closed doors of really nice-looking neighborhoods. And then my friend who was there, the person that he was with, I knew the young man, and the young man had struggled in and out of being unhoused. So I knew his story. And then I stand up with the person that I'm accompanying. And I realize once I stand up and look at the magistrate presiding, I had presided at his wedding. And I went, "Oh, hello, Honorable so-and-so." And he went, "Hello." Just this knowing look passed. And so we went through our time. I was standing next to this person that I'm trying to help, and we get through our process, and then we're dismissed. And later he sends me an email, and he says, "I've been in your place before." And I said, "Thank you." And that's all that needed to pass between us. But it was this amazing convergence of all of these stories coming together, and God just kind of tapping me on the shoulder and saying, "I am here. Do not forget, I am here."
Yeah, that's and sometimes we associate God's presence with happy outcomes. Right, I could tell a story. The one time I went to court to contest a traffic ticket, don't even let your mind roam around that too much. But I just had to go do this. So I go to court, and I get there, and if you've been to court downtown, it's just a disaster. And there had to be 200 people waiting, and so I'm there thinking, oh, I was in such a mood. And the judge came in, and he was a guy I'd had coffee with like the day before. And he looked up and he saw me, and he called the attorney over. They called me down, said, "Case dismissed." I didn't argue. Now, I could claim God was there. That's so self-centered, right? Because I'm a person of privilege. Sometimes people of privilege have fortunate things happen for them, but they chalk it up to God. We chalk things up to God erroneously sometimes. Let me try to talk about this. Don't get offended, but it's just an important principle. The shooting of former President Trump the other day, a lot of people that I knew said, God spared him. And there's, of course, a problem with this, right? In that God could have made the shooter just not shoot. Or God might have spared the fact someone actually was killed there, right? So it's kind of quirky thinking. So we tend to see God to our benefit. Sometimes God is there in the hours that it's just really dark and painful and nobody really sees much hope. That actually is when God is very present. So it's not dependent on a happy outcome and such. Anyway, anything recently, like in your process of packing up, moving, coming here, where you've been sort of surprised by God?
Yes.
I hoped someone would say yes. All right.
And I shared this with someone coming in. So I have found a lovely older home down in Matthews, right behind Matthews United Methodist. And the moving truck came here first, unloaded my office, because I probably have way too much. And then it took 2 days to unload a day and a half to unload the truck at the house. So big truck. Little kids next door come out, and they're all interested in the big truck. And I love little kids, so I'm thinking, oh, this is great. And then I'm only seeing other people kind of peek out of their houses and look, this lady has all this stuff in a truck. The truck pulls away the first day. They don't know it's coming back the second day. They did get the baby grand out that first day. That was something. And then slowly knocks come on the door or people catch me out in the yard, and I am moping. I am just like, what in the world have I done? This is crazy. I should have said no, all of these self-doubts. And people kept coming up and saying, hey, I'm so-and-so, and I just wanted to welcome you to the neighborhood. Hey, I heard you have a dog. We have a dog walking group in the neighborhood. We meet at that corner every night at 8 o'clock. You're welcome to join us. Hey, what help do you need? I was out trying to crank, I love to mow the yard, trying to crank my great, I know. I've been mowing the yard since I was 8, honest to goodness.
I live close to you.
Sister, if I can get my lawnmower fixed.
I've got a yard.
Okay. All right. I'll be an expensive yard person, but nevertheless. So I'm realizing in the move as I'm trying to crank my easy crank Honda mower that's always cranked on the first try, even after the winter, and it's not cranking and I can't get things engaged. And my brother's a mechanic, so I'm pretty smart about some of these things, knowing what to do. Mr. Gentleman from across the street comes and he says, well, hey, have you tried this? And I just kindly say, yes. I might have rolled my eyes behind his back. And have you tried this? Yes, sir, I have. And he said, yeah, this thing looks like it's all frozen up. Yes, sir, it does, doesn't it? And he said, well, I gave up mowing years ago. And I said, okay. He said, but I kept one mower. Would you like to borrow it? And I said, yes, I would. He didn't say, would you like the name of a lawn service? I think he sensed my frustration and that I wanted to get this task done. And he said, you just keep that, little lady, till you get yours fixed. And all of it.
He said, little lady?
He did. I don't encourage that, in case you're wondering. It's the first time I'm meeting my neighbor. And so I just said, yes, thank you. I didn't say little man. He was my elder, and he's loaning me his nice Toro lawnmower that really is an easy crank. Okay. And all of that together made me start sensing that the Spirit was sending me these little signs that just said, it's okay, you're in the right place. There's people around here that are going to help care for you, and they're noticing, and let them. That was the other part, is I had to say yes. Let them help you. So that has been a huge gift. In addition, and then I'll stop, to coming here and people, especially on Sunday, saying, we're so glad you're here. We can't wait to love you. And that's pretty unique, I will say, in a first Sunday. So thank you all.
And it's not always it's not always like the good Christian people who provide the kindness. Actually, sometimes the good Christian people can be less than kind. So sometimes it's people, they don't believe in God, they don't think twice about God, but they can actually be the embodiment of God's tenderness and care, which I love that. That's like a humbling, surprising, wonderful thing. Laura.
I have a story about my son, Asher. So Asher's 7, and he is moving across the country. We all are. We're leaving behind Anna and Leah, and those are his 2 best friends. He loves them more than anything, and his grandma. And so there were a lot of big emotions, okay? And I don't want to just put that on Asher. All of us have a lot of big emotions, okay? But when you're 7, you don't deal with your big emotions as well as other people. So there were some words that Asher was saying to Grandma, who he loves, that were like, I hate you. It was just... Anyway, we realized that he's suffering with this move. He's having a hard time. And so his first thing here was to come to VBS before we even started, like before the boxes even, are fully into the house. We're like, let's go to VBS. And so we came to VBS here, and I didn't know if he would, trot out the bad emotions or whatever. He had the best day. He made new friends. His teachers were wonderful. After it, I said, hey, I have found some gelato, which is really fancy ice cream, at this church. Would you like to go get some ice cream with me? And he said, there is ice cream at this church? I said, yes. So we went and we had some ice cream, and he said, Mom, this church has campfire light, and it has nice people and nice teachers, and it has ice cream. He said, I'm just so jealous of this church. And I said, Asher, you don't need to be jealous of this church. This is your new church. And he was like, it is? I said, it is. And so that whole week he went around telling people, this is my new church. This is my new church. This is my mom's new church and my dad's new church. It's our new church. And people were like, yes, it is. But for him to have that church, we don't have family here. Y'all are our family. And to have him fall in love with the family on day one and be so jealous, that was a God moment for me as his mom.
So I'm reminded of the story when we moved here 21 plus years ago. My kids were fine with it, except my son Noah, who was 8. He was so sad. He just sobbed night after night. And so we moved in the house. He just was not happy. So back then, the district superintendent, George Thompson, lived across the street. So George called and said, come, bring Noah over here. I'd like to get to know him. So we go over, and we tool over there, and he makes iced tea or something for us. And so we're talking, and Noah gets kind of curious, and he says, now, what do you do? He said, I'm the district superintendent. And Noah said, what does the district superintendent do? And George said, I appoint pastors. I decide where pastors will serve. I make appointments. And Noah said, I have an appointment suggestion for you. And George walked right in and said, what is it? And he said, you should send James Howell back to Davidson. It was hilarious. So, another question. These are just some of our very fine, wonderful people who go to church here, are part of this church family that I love so much and that you already love so much. It's a real privilege to be part of this. What do you think God might be about to do? And you could answer in your area, because Nancy, you work in congregational care, and Laura, you work in missions, but it doesn't have to be that. It could be something else. What do you think how God might show up and surprise even like church veterans, like the people that are out here?
I think of churches as plants a lot of times when I go different places, so that I don't go up to a new church and I had a nice tomato plant at the old one, and I knew how to do that, and I'm banging on an oak tree saying, give me tomatoes. It won't work. But coming here, I felt like it wasn't just a plant, it's a garden. And one of the things that we are called to do is bear fruit. And when you think about fruit, fruit doesn't benefit the plant that produces it. Fruit is always for the next generation and for the rest of the benefit of others, right? Fruit nourishes others. And so the exciting thing about coming here is it's just this vineyard, this orchard that is already planted and already thriving and already growing. And so my excitement would be how to share the fruit that is already here with the community so more people can know the goodness and the sweetness of God. And so that more lives can be, because sometimes the fruit that people need is spiritual, and sometimes it's just really practical. They're hungry, or they're scared, or they need to know that who they are is loved just as they are. And so just to get to share that fruit, that's not a new thing. I think God will surprise us with what the new thing is, but I'm excited to share the fruit and to be in this garden.
Yeah, y'all know me, so sometimes I worry that our church looks cooler than we really are. We look like the greatest church on planet Earth. It's a wonderful church. But what I mean by that is I think of some of the most involved people that I've known in my life as a pastor. And I've watched some of them discover, like, there's a whole nother gear, there's a whole nother dimension. I've had very generous donors, and they thought, boy, look at all I'm doing. And then they discover another gear, not because they became wealthier, but because they fell more deeply in love with God, and they became way more generous givers. I've discovered people, they volunteered a little somewhere, but then one day the light came on, and they got really seriously engaged with some people. And then we have a lot of people here, they've not been much engaged. They kind of come when it's convenient and haven't come to classes and volunteered for mission things, but they're right on the edge, and it's just for the want of one person to say, come, right? Or maybe in their own life to say, it's been a little hollow here lately. Like, I wonder what I actually need. It might have something to do with God. It does have something to do with God, right? So we're just scratching the surface of what, not just that the church can do, but what we as individual Christians might, and it's the joy that we miss out on. I still love C.S. Lewis's little book about his conversion. He titled it Surprised by Joy. Like, I love that. It's not like, I learned a lot of doctrine and that was intellectually great for me. He was surprised by joy, right? That's what it was. Okay, same question, Nancy.
It's a long way down to that floor. Thank you. I realize transitions can also help that happen. I was texting with a friend back in Western North Carolina this morning about the learning curve that I'm experiencing right now. And
that's called a fire hose.
I was trying to be gracious in my wording. And yes, it is like a fire hose. And a learning curve at this season of life is different than it was 9 years ago when I moved to a new community. And I'm struggling a little bit. I also realize the great opportunity it presents. My sense, my intuition, my discernment tells me that that also can happen for the community, the system, or as we use in our churchy language, the body that I'm coming into, that things can shift a little bit too for other people. So what I've already been praying for Myers Park and for all staff is that we spend some time in discernment about what may God be calling me to next in my own relationship with God, but also in my relationship with the community, this community, and how this community engages our larger community. I am keenly aware of because I'm coming in from the outside, I'm very aware of that persona that Myers Park has. And so I know the great good that can also come from that. My hope is that on the whole, not even just for congregational care, but the ministry of reconciliation will happen over, and that will be part of the fruit that you were mentioning over and over and over again, because we have so many places for that to happen, and in an election year. For us, as the people of God, to talk about that as our ministry is one thing, one very important thing I believe our country really needs.
And not just talk about it, but model it.
Exactly.
Model how we love people across differences, that the love of Jesus is bigger than that. That is a witness that the church can give that is nowhere else in this world.
Yeah.
As part of what I want to do this program on, kind of the election season and spirituality. One, it's for you as a person, but then also there might be a ripple effect, right? We encounter people, you have neighbors, everybody's angry and annoyed about something. We could be the salt of the earth, the light to the world, the ways that we could do that. And one last question. You both have talked about discerning. You could probably do a 5-week workshop on this, but what's the elevator speech? How do you discern what God is asking? How do you discern what God is saying versus just kind of baptizing what I like, what I really want to do?
I think discernment is spiritual listening. It's like not just listening with your ears, but with your spirit. And for me, that takes time sometimes. I mean, sometimes you don't have the luxury of time, and it's an arrow prayer, and you need to talk to God, and God needs to answer, and God never fails us in those moments. But oftentimes for me, discernment is spending time in the Word and reading God's Word and letting it actually offend us and letting it change us and transform us. Having brothers and sisters who will speak to us about our blind spots and about our gifts, and prayer, of course, worship, just the things that we know and do, and then paying attention. For me, it's been learning to pay attention to that small voice inside of me. Even if the voice is bringing to mind somebody, then I'll test it and I'll give them a call and say, hey, you are on my mind. And then if they say, oh my gosh, you will not believe this day, I needed you, then that helps me understand when I'm hearing God's voice and when it's just beans from a really great taco or something that I ate. Yeah.
Some people know this story, but I love to repeat it. I won't tell the whole thing. You mentioned tattoos earlier. My daughter Sarah's 25th birthday, I had lunch with her at Duke. She said, Dad, I got a tattoo. And I'm like, oh my gosh. She said, do you want to see it? I didn't know the answer to that question. She showed it to me, and it was Hebrew under her ear, and what the Hebrew translated to is that passage in Kings, the still small voice. She said, Dad, are you mad? I'm like, yeah, I'm really mad that you put something about God's voice under your ear. Anyway, it was a lovely tattoo, to say the least. She's got a bunch more now. It's a thing.
It's generational.
Yeah. Nancy.
Very similar to your response. The first words that came to me were inward and outward in terms of discernment. So inward being that personal time that I am spending with God through prayer, through scripture, through devotional reading, through journaling, through prayer walking. I'm learning in this season of life to engage my body a little bit more than my brain, and that's been helpful in discernment for me. Part of that inward journey is I've also identified where I sense the Spirit provoking me. I like the word provoke. And you may hear me talk more about the small of my back. And when I feel something in the small of my back, it's often the Spirit provoking me to not be so comfortable. I also have the outward discernment of people who know me best, people that come to mind that I have not perhaps had conversation with that still know me best, but the reason that they're coming to, and when I say mind, it's also heart, that I ask them, and I ask them to not hold back, and I put that all together, and sometimes I need provoking again, and I have to go back and keep repeating that cycle when I've ignored the first call, and then I get the second call, like what it was to come here. I think discernment is something that is as individual as our fingerprint, and that's one of the conversations I actually love to have with people is, if you're struggling to figure out what does discernment look like for you, I'd love to have that conversation with you. If you'd love to share with me how you experience discernment, that is more experience for me to then be able to perceive in the ministry that I serve on your behalf with others. Yeah.
Well, thank you. I thought I would close with a prayer. I wasn't being rude. I was fishing the prayer up on my phone while we were talking. This is a prayer actually that we shared yesterday. Our clergy had a little time together at my home. That was fun. And this is a prayer that I found and shared with them, and I thought it would be good to share with you as well. So if you'd bow your heads and be attentive to this prayer. You are a God who rejects self-sufficiency even in yourself. We recognize the idol of self-reliance has cast a long shadow over our ability to connect and be together with others. Show us the tender places in us that are afraid to belong, and make us honest about our desires for nearness. Convict us of our own self-absorption when we begin to view others through their usefulness to us. Show us the joy of witnessing the life of another. Make us responsible and shrewd when we consider our companions. Expose that relationships that are not friendship but predator and prey. Be near to those who long for fun and empowering and deep friendships. Remind us that the depth of disclosure must always revere time, that we should not rush our friends to places where it is not yet safe to go. Help us to delight in every season of friendship and find love in unexpected places. It is scary to belong to each other, but grant us courage to commit ourselves to friendship in a lonely world. Amen. Friends, thank you for coming, and thank Laura and Nancy, if you would.